I prepared for this show by watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
This is the worst.
Mota Zitabanakis, welcome into the Worst Fantasy Show. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. It is Sunday. We are back to answer some Sunday questions. So if you guys are watching, listening, please drop your comments and questions in the chat. We'll be prioritizing chat questions, but otherwise I will be tapping into my resource for Sunday questions. Like always, shout out to fantasy sportsadvice.network. That's where I go and pull all of my questions, whether it is on the main site or off the group chat, both of which you can get access to if you go check out the site. So without any further ado, we'll just start. And we got a good one right off the bat here. Half PPR. Am I starting Jamison Williams or am I starting Tyreek Hill and Prey? For me, that's Tyreek Hill and Prey, because I feel like Jamison Williams, as much as he had like a good game, it has been inconsistent. And so if you're talking about inconsistency anyways, then just give me the far more talented player in Tyreek Hill. And I actually think Tyler Huntley is a competent backup quarterback. We have seen him with the Baltimore Ravens in the past. He can run and escape the pocket a little bit, maybe create some things on the run. So I think if there's a Dolphins receiver that I'm going to be starting, it is going to be Tyreek Hill. And I would start him over Jamison Williams. That feels like a bit of a deep stretch. Chuba Hubbard, Najee Harris, and Tony Pollard. Need two of these guys. Which would you start? I'm a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, but the arm injury does have me nervous. Not necessarily for how much Najee is going to play, but just for how effective he's going to be. I know Jaylen Warren might not be in this game and may even be limited, but that just means we're going to be seeing some more Cordarrelle Patterson, which Arthur Smith is just not going to let that die. So as much as I think Najee's going to see his 17 to 20 touches, I don't know how efficient they're going to be. Like I could see him having another kind of like last week, like 17 for 70 all purpose. And maybe he bails you out with some cheap PPR or a touchdown. But I actually like Tony Pollard. I know last week was a bad matchup, but he only had 9 touches overall, and it was a weird game. And at some point, the coaches just got to take the ball out of Will Levis's hands, and you would think that would mean using their running backs more, including Tyjae Spears, which I don't think affects Tony Pollard at all. We saw the first 2 games, Pollard looked incredible. So I think I'm going Tony Pollard and Chuba Hubbard here because he saw all the work. Miles Sanders, basically irrelevant. Even with Andy Dalton and kind of the improved team for the Carolina Panthers, we still saw Miles Sanders is not getting any kind of real work for fantasy, and Chuba Hubbard got a shit ton. And now Deontay Johnson has popped up suddenly with a groin injury. And also, the Bengals are better as a pass defense than a run defense. I think that's kind of been overlooked too. So I think regardless, Chuba Hubbard is a nice play here because he's going to be involved, passing and running. Okay, we got a trade question here. Would you trade Jaden Reed and Zach Ertz for Isaiah Likely and Deontay Johnson? See, there's 0% chance that you're getting this through right now. Assuming that if you're the Deontay Johnson, Isaiah Likely owner and you're trying to capitalize and trading for just those assets, there's no way in hell I would do that. And the same thing with, like, if I'm the Jaden Reed, Zach Ertz manager, I'm not even sending this because there's no way that the person would have to like slip and fall and accidentally hit the accept button for this to go through. Like, Deontay Johnson's coming off 14 targets in his best game of the season with the quarterback change. And Isaiah Likely, as much as it's been a struggle for the last 2 weeks, he obviously popped off week 1. Mark Andrews hasn't looked fully to form. I mean, even technically as a backup, I mean, Zach Ertz is, I mean, that's the problem is Mark Andrews is out here running and he looks like Zach Ertz. So I'm not going to start Zach Ertz. Yeah, that's one that to me is, if I get that in my inbox, honestly, for those two players, I just chuckle and I just decline. That's not even really grounds. Like if I'm really feeling nice, I may go look at your roster to see an actual appropriate trade for those two players, but this ain't it. Again, if anyone out there watching, you got any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll prioritize them above the forum, but otherwise we're going to just hammer on through some more of these questions. See, this is a tough one here. Jerome Ford or Najee Harris in the flex. That one I think is a lot more of a struggle. I like Jerome Ford a lot. The problem is I don't know how much Cleveland actually likes him. Like the fact that Deontay Foreman kind of saw 14 touches randomly and then like was relegated and not involved. Now the Vegas defense is beat up. They're going to be without Max Crosby, which is like the linchpin of their defense. The struggle with Ford, really, like I said, is you would expect that he would be seeing more volume, but he's just not. I'm just pulling it up right here, actually, because I have Ford in a very important dynasty league. And yeah, I'm looking at, so week 1, okay, 12 rush attempts and 6 receptions. That's 18 opportunities. And then the following week, just 8. 7 rushes, 1 reception. And this last week, only 13, 10, and 3. So, yes, he is the primary receiving back. Yes, he is technically the starting running back, but it just feels like they're capping him for no reason, and I can't tell why. I don't know what Stefanski's deal is that he insists on putting in like these other plotting running backs to just run straight up the middle for inefficient yardage. Like, I don't know if it's because he's trying to seemingly protect Deshaun Watson or necessarily what's going on there. Like, again, I pull up Deontay Foreman. He was cut, brought back to the practice squad, and then last week, not this week. So this, and again, it just doesn't make any sense. This week, when they were against the Giants, he had 2 rushing attempts. The week before, 14 for 42. So again, it's just, and whether it was they're trying to fit in guys like Pierre Strong and Deontay, I just don't understand what they're doing. Like, just let Jerome Ford have it, and that's not happening. So even still, based on the matchup and based on, again, Najee Harris scares the hell out of me because of his arm was in a sling. Like, I know he's going to play, but that feels like a big deal. So I don't know. It's probably just pain management. I'm assuming he's going to play through. If Najee gets the touchdown, like maybe he's the better play here, but I feel like I'm still sticking to my guns with Jerome Ford. And that might come back to bite me. You know, shout out to Joe Ortiz, wherever you are. That's why Jaden Daniels is on the thumbnail this week, because that was such a bad call last week. And it sucks because it's one of those calls in fantasy that you almost have to make. It was he asked me if he should start CJ Stroud or Jaden Daniels. And Jaden Daniels up to that point had looked okay, but definitely didn't look anything like what we saw in week 3. And CJ Stroud obviously also correlating and coincidentally had a down week. So it looks extra bad, right? But it's like 9 times out of 10, you would start CJ Stroud without the hindsight, like without knowing what actually happened. It was more of an outlier outcome. And so it's one of those things of like process over results. It still feels bad, but I don't just suddenly change my entire way of thinking because that happened, is what I'm getting at. If it happens over and over, you start to see a trend, like obviously you need to adapt. But generally speaking, I mean, we've seen it with Caleb Williams and just generally with rookie quarterbacks, like, and maybe that's a thing. Maybe some rookie quarterbacks are going to be starting to ascend more like we saw last year with CJ Stroud. We're seeing this year with Jaden Daniels. If they fall in certain situations with certain coaching staffs and it clicks and they have some assets around them that they can work with, you know, a Terry McLaurin, a Brian Robinson, a Austin Eckler, even though he's injured now, et cetera, et cetera. Like, yeah, maybe we kind of underrated what the Commanders were capable of. But again, looking back, I still would have, me personally too, in my own lineups, like most of the time I would have gone Stroud. And I think the other part too was the way that he framed the scoring for his league. Like, I have one league that's really messed up. Uh, it's an IDP best ball league. It's a Jersey league. Shout out again to Fantasy Sports Advice Network. They're the ones that run it. But it's it's the Josh Allen IDP Jersey League, and the thing is, the scoring is really fucking tweaked for running backs and running quarterbacks specifically. So, like, I took Jaden Daniels in that format because when I was looking at the scores, the average scores of the rushing quarterbacks when they hit, it was like 50, 60 fantasy points, which is not normal in most formats, right? And then conversely, like the guys who were just pure passing, it was actually closer to like between 30 to 45. So that's where I was like, okay, in this very specific format, obviously rushing quarterbacks are going to really break that format, and therefore I would start Jaden Daniels over CJ Stroud. That's like one league out of 26 that I'm in. The other 25, I'm starting CJ Stroud. You know what I mean? Like, so again, process over results. It's not always going to be right, but it is what it is. Gesicki or Conklin, 1 point PPR. Talk about a depressing question. I know Conklin kind of getting more involved, but Denver's defense is still kind of a little bit underrated. They can be had at times, but they can also show up, fuck up a game plan. I know Garrett Wilson's probably going to see primarily Pat Surtain Jr., and so arguably Conklin may see more targets, but I think it's kind of overlooked and underrated that Aaron Rodgers traditionally in his entire career has never really used the tight ends on any real consistent basis. Like, yeah, you would see Mercedes Lewis and those kind of guys pop up from time to time. And you could argue also that he's never really had like a true athletic, like receiving tight end for any kind of long term. I know there was that, I'm forgetting the guy's name in Green Bay. There was one athletic tight end. He unfortunately got injured. It kind of ended his career early, and then he just kind of had a bunch of jags for the rest of the time that he was there. Like Mercedes Lewis is not a jag, but by the time that he was playing in Green Bay, he was like 38 fucking years old. So like clearly a veteran player at that point of his career. So it's like, he just has, like, when he's got a guy like Conklin, he's not just going to abuse him with targets the way people think is what I'm getting at. And so I'm actually looking at Gesicki here. The only thing that makes me nervous about Gesicki is that T. Higgins maybe is getting that full step back. Jamar Chase, having, you know, gone through his training camp now, is more involved. And so maybe you see a little bit of less targets. But I think Gesicki has kind of established himself as the third man in that rotation. The way also that Burrow, I think, really likes to utilize tight ends. It's not just Gesicki that's getting involved here. We're seeing Drew Sample mix in as well. So they're actively scheming tight end into this offense. And I think it is very much like the third target, even above like an Andre Yoshivas or a Jermaine Burton. I think it really goes Chase Higgins, you know, and then Gesicki kind of in the middle, intermediate, and then dump offs to the running backs. I think that's the progression of reads for Burrow. So I think in this situation with the matchup, the fact that I'm hoping for an Andy Dalton revenge game too, so maybe a little bit of extra scoring on the Panthers side to inflate the overall score of the game, whereas I view a lower scoring game with Jets Denver. I can't believe we spent this much time on it, but I am finally deciding on Mike Gesicki. All right. Oh wow, here's a tough one. Would you trade Drake London for Brock Bowers or stick with Mark Andrews? London is my wide receiver 3, but it drops off to Jacoby Myers after that. Wow. Okay. I have some thoughts here. First of all, oh man, that's tough. The fact that it's Jacoby Myers is that other player. I don't think it's as much of a drop off from London to Myers as you might think it is, especially if it turns out to actually be like Devontae Adams is trying to leave town and ends up being able to leave this team this year. If that happens, Jacoby Myers to me is just as valuable this year in redraft as Drake London is. The problem is, like, would I want to trade London for Bowers, and then I would have Bowers, Myers, and Andrews? Potentially, yes. I think what I would be really trying hard to do is, okay, if I have the Drake London, Brock Bowers trade set up, I might not be able to get as much for Jacoby Myers and Mark Andrews, but I should be able to get something. And so maybe that's where I'm like actively shopping to see what wide receiver could I maybe get back as a slight upgrade to Jacoby Myers and Mark Andrews right now that I could then have in conjunction with getting Brock Bowers. So in a sense, it would be like you're trading London, Andrews, and Myers for Bowers and a wide receiver. That's one way to look at it. If you were going to do that, that's I think where I would go with it. But yeah, I think my only struggle would be having both Bowers and Myers on my team. All right, we got a couple questions in the chat. Let's hit those. All rise. Yes. Are you original Bloodline or are you this new Wish version of Bloodline? That's what I gotta know. Are you still with the tribal chief Roman Reigns, or are you down with Solo Sikoa? What are we doing here? But shout out to you, my friend. Morning, Jack. PPR. Would you start Higgins or JMO over any of these guys? Jerome Ford, Najee Harris, and I'm starting Tyreek, bro. I get it. It's been rough in these quarterback streets for the Miami Dolphins. Look, Tyler Huntley, I am actually pretty intimately familiar with because so I have this 16-team dynasty league, and I've been in that league for I think it's going on 3 years now, and I've been in the title back-to-back years. It's a super flex league. My quarterbacks are Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. So that's been my big advantage. Obviously, 16-team leagues having those two quarterbacks. And the rest of my roster is stacked is because I made a lot of heavy trades to have like a really stacked roster. And anyways, the bottom line is I have Lamar Jackson and I had Tyler Huntley for a long time because he was obviously Lamar's backup. And there were times where I straight up like Lamar was out, so I put Tyler Huntley in, and I got a little more familiar with Tyler Huntley, is what I'm saying, than I think just your regular fantasy player. And what I would say to you is he's Tyrod Taylor light. I really believe that he is very emblematic and symbolic and representative of the kind of quarterback that Tyrod Taylor is. And so what I'm saying is for fantasy, that makes Tyreek Hill relevant, more relevant in my opinion than the rest of these guys. Like you could maybe take your shot on T. Higgins. There is always that chance that T. Higgins has the monster game. You never know when it's going to come though. That is absolutely a roulette wheel. If you feel it in your loins, in your plums, you feel it down low, then you start T. Higgins. If you feel the big, huge monster game is coming today. If you don't feel that, I'm still starting Tyreek over all these guys. Because, again, I think Ty Huntley is an adequate backup quarterback. I think he's an average starter. Again, I think he is Tyrod Taylor light. That's kind of how I view him. So I think that's just to instill maybe a little bit of hope for Tyreek's production because you're not going to be stranded by Chip, Skylar Thompson, or Tim O'Boyle rules. You know what I'm saying? All right, we got Z Smitty. Komet or Schultz? Komet is Keenan back, but Schultz is no Tank and maybe no mix-in. Yeah, I mean, Dalton Schultz has just been entirely irrelevant to the point that, like, and it's overlooked. I forget the kid's name, but the tight end there, they drafted like the backup tight end for the Texans. Hang on, I'm gonna actually pull it up here. So we'll pull up Schultz because I'll be able to just pull up his team. It'll be easier that way. So it's really, I think it's kind of a sneaky, underrated storyline that people overlooked. Here. Okay, Cade Stover. There it is. Random fucking name. Cade Stover. You're like, Jack, who the fuck is Cade Stover and why would that matter at all? Cade Stover played with CJ Stroud in college. They were teammates. And so there is a connection there. And we've already seen, actually, Stover has like been on the field. He is the tight end too. And he's seen, little bits of work here and there. So if you're playing Dalton Schultz, to me, that is a heavy dart throw. With Komet, I get it. It feels like chasing points. I generally would agree, except I think Shane Waldron's offense is ass. And I think, yes, Keenan might be back. I don't know if he's fully back in this first week with the heel. I know he saw a shit ton of targets. That one, I feel like could really go either way. But there's just something that tells me that Komet is still going to see like those kind of gross menial targets. And again, I know that first week he just was completely uninvolved when Keenan Allen was on the field, and that's what's so scary. It's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, the matchup is better, I feel like, for Komet. I don't know if Keenan is going to be like fully back. I see your reasoning here. Vegas leans Schultz for TD odds, yards, receptions, but Komet's usage has been increasing and facing a really bad tight end defense. Yeah. I feel like they're both bad. The tight end is rough this year. The fact that you're having to make this decision, first of all, my apologies to you. But then second of all, I think I lean Komet barely. But and I don't think Joe Mixon really has any relevance. I do think if Tank Dell sits and Nico is limited, I think is my thing. Because if Nico is out there and playing for the most part close to 100%, like this is all just going to go to Nico and Stephon Diggs. And Schultz might see like 4 targets and you're praying he finds the end zone. But if Nico is also limited and Tank Dell is out and Joe Mixon's out, so they're not running the ball as much, you could argue, I guess, then maybe I lean Dalton Schultz. But like I can tell you I have 0% Dalton Schultz in redraft, dynasty, and best ball. There's not a lot of players I can say I have 0% of. Dalton Schultz is one of them. So I might be a little biased also, but I just feel like Komet. And the thing, too, is I saw Caleb Williams throw the ball 50 times, and I don't know that Stroud has to throw the ball 50 times, even if Joe Mixon's not available, because they will still use Cam Akers and lean on him a little bit. So, and the matchups, I feel like, are better. I do think the matchup is better for Chicago against the Rams. Yeah. Freiermuth, nah. Freiermuth is unfortunately very irrelevant in Arthur Smith's offense. Like Darnell Washington is vulturing this man's touchdowns. Again, those are some really rough tight. Yeah, McBride. That's what it is. McBride's hurt or Ertz are available. It's so bad that I think Zach Ertz might actually be like the best play in terms of just a floor, but I'm still, out of all these guys, like I'm going for Komet. I'm chasing the points. I kind of don't give a shit. It's like, again, Schultz, to me, it's like the ceiling is he catches a touchdown and he gets 10 points. Komet could get 10 points by getting like 5 for 50. Like, I think he's the most likely to do something like that, if that makes sense. So I think that's still where I'm leaning is Komet. All right, let's jump back into a couple more of these forum questions. Thank you guys again so much for jumping in the chats. If anyone else has any questions, or if you guys, All Rise Z Smitty, come up with any more questions, feel free. I'll hit them in between. But we got a couple coming up here. Again, I see a lot of Tyreek questions coming up. Tyreek Hill or Ramondre Stevenson in the flex? I'm going with Tyreek. It feels like a Tyreek week. You know what I mean? Like a dude like Snoop Huntley coming in, that kind of nickname. I could see Tyreek having like 8 for 80 and a tutty. Like that's kind of how I'm seeing it. It feels like a PPR play today. So I think I'm still rolling with Tyreek there. All right, here we go. Let's find some questions. Half PPR, Ramondre Stevenson or Jameson Williams at the flex. In that case, being half PPR, I actually think I would go with Ramondre. Tough one. I know, again, Patriots offense has been lukewarm at best. It's a tough matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, but it just feels like if they're going to have a chance, it's going to be through Ramondre. And I just, I'm not very in on Jameson Williams. Like, oh, if you and there was a stat I had seen too, something about how like the Lions haven't beat the Seahawks in like 12 or 13 regular season games, something crazy like that. Like the Seahawks have just been pounding on the Lions. So I don't know exactly what and the Lions have just been generally disappointing, I think, a little bit on offense. I mean, the whole NFL, the scoring is down across the board, but I feel like the Lions in particular were supposed to be kind of immune to that with the amount of offensive weaponry they had. And quite frankly, Jared Goff has been ass. And I was a huge proponent of Jared Goff, especially with all the dome games he had this year. I feel like I'm struggling with that. Here's an interesting question, though. Jameson Williams was dropped in my 0.5 PPR league. How much fab should I use out of $100? Yeah, I mean, if you really need a wide receiver, Sam Laporta is dealing with injuries. He obviously is having some success. If they can really figure things out, maybe it becomes a little bit more consistent, but it's more of like a boom or bust thing. I look at it like 15%. You know, if I really need a wide receiver, I would spend like I never do increments of 5, by the way. Always when I just as kind of a tip in general when you're doing fab bids, I always do fucked up amounts just because I'm trying. So like for example, if I'm gonna bid 10, then I will bid usually like depending on the player, like I might bid 11 or 13 is a more common one for me because it's like assuming someone else. I'm always like, well, if somebody else thought what I thought, they might do 11, and then so I'll have the one that's so again galaxy braining a little bit, but I do weird amounts like that. Another common one is like if I'm going to do 25%, then I'll do 27. Again, just weird little things like that. If I'm going to do 50%, I'll do 53. It's kind of same reasoning before from the 10 to 13 again. And it happens sometimes where it's like I'll see the bids come in and someone put 51 and I have 53 and I'm like, oh, I bet they're pissed. Oh, I bet they're just fucking steaming. And those are always the best fab wins, by the way, is when you won it by like $1 or $2 because you did a fucky little bid like that. And they're like, this motherfucker. It's like, yeah, I watched Price is Right growing up, man. What can I say? All right, we got a question in the chat here from Jerry Bagshaw, good friend of the show. Hello, Jerry. Justin Fields versus the Colts or Jordan Love in his first game back against the Vikings? I'm leaning Fields, by a little bit. Not because I'm a Steelers fan, but because Brian Flores and that Vikings defense is for real. And I really think that the Steelers have kind of figured things out for the most part with Justin Fields. And if you're in any kind of 4-point passing league, especially, 100% that tilts me to Fields. Like if it's 6-point passing, there is an argument to be made for Jordan Love. But I would still, in that case, I think lean towards the safety and floor of Justin Fields rushing compared to Jordan Love, who has to not only beat an incredibly good defense that is on fire right now, but has to have probably 3 passing touchdowns to equate what Justin Fields is going to do just by running 10 times for, 50, 60 yards and maybe pop one in for a tutty. So I think, again, I lean Fields this week specifically for the floor. Now, obviously, it's not a long-term season thing. I would much rather have Jordan Love for the rest of the season. But again, just this very specific matchup, this first week back from the injury, the fact that it's the Vikings defense and they're hot as anybody right now in the NFL, and the fact that Justin Fields is playing relatively well and the Colts defense can definitely be had, and especially on the run, and especially with the running backs banged up, feels like a big Justin Fields week on the ground. So I'm actively playing Justin Fields in the leagues that I have him. And if I was having to make this decision, I would play Fields in just this. And then probably the rest of the way, I'll be picking Love most of the time. I think the only exception is, again, if you're in 4-point passing touchdown leagues, then you're saying to me like, well, he needs 3 passing touchdowns just to get 12 points. And Justin Fields can literally get 12 points by, again, just running the ball 10 for 80 or running a tutty. It's like, it's a lot easier path, I think, for him. Zach Lockwich in the chat. What's up, my man? What do you think about Reed for Monty, Ford, Dowdle, or Dobbins, or do I hold Reed? I would, I was about to say I would love to get Montgomery. But then you said I have Jahmyr Gibbs and Chase and Neighbors at wide receiver. Fuck. Why you gotta have Jahmyr Gibbs already? I would say David Montgomery is an absolute lock to me. That's the one for me where I'm like 100% I would take David Montgomery. He's like such a consistent running back right now. Running backs across the board have just been more consistent than the wide receivers. I still think I would do it. Even though you have Jahmyr Gibbs, I think you can start Gibbs and Montgomery. It's going to look fucked up and it's going to make you feel weird, but it's going to work. You can start Gibbs and Montgomery as your RB1 and RB2 in the same lineup, and it's totally fine. They're both viable for different reasons. They're both very involved in the offense. I think it goes Amon-Ra St. Brown and then Jahmyr Gibbs right now in terms of like the targets progression in terms of the passing game. I think David Montgomery is clearly their workhorse running back, getting 18 to 20 touches a game, getting red zone opportunities, goal line opportunities. Like, yeah, I love David Montgomery. I love him a lot more than Ford, Dowdle, or Dobbins. I think Dobbins is the only one other that would give me cause for pause just because it seems like they're fading Gus Bus, and as long as Dobbins is healthy, I think because of the story also, they're going to keep him in and involved as much as they can. So I think I would be actively trying to get Montgomery. I would 100% love to trade Jayden Reed for David Montgomery, even though Jordan Love is potentially back. The only thing that, again, I think in your very specific situation, you got to hold Jayden Reed. With Jordan Love coming back, Jayden Reed looked like a potential wide receiver, like 2 with wide receiver 1 upside. And I understand you have Chase and Neighbors, but then like it depends on the fall off at wide receiver after. And the fact that you have Jahmyr Gibbs, I think it's going to be too scary for most. You'd have to really have some balls of steel, my man, to trade for David Montgomery and start Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery week in and week out. I wouldn't do it for Dobbins, so I think I'm just holding Reed in this situation. I think we got there. Hey, Albert, what's up, my man? And then we got some more questions. Jonas, what's up, mate? Greetings from Germany. Start 2, full PPR. Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, Bucky Irving, and Pop Douglas. We went deep with the Keon Coleman one last week, and it paid off. Thank God, because when coaches do this shit, it kind of drives me nuts. I'm glad he ended up getting in the game and getting the touchdown, but Coleman, I guess, was held out of the first half because of disciplinary reasons, because he was late to the game or a practice or something or another. And so they basically didn't let him play the first half, and then they let him play the second half, and he did catch the 124-yard touchdown. Without that, he would have been completely irrelevant. So that was 100% a save. Hopefully he gets to play the whole game this week. Bucky Irving is the one that I really was wanting to get into my lineups this week, but because he popped up with the injury, it makes me super nervous that he is just going to be, again, the backup running back. And if he gets the same backup touches that he was getting last week, but is now suddenly slightly more inefficient with them because of the injury, it's really not going to be a good fantasy week. I think with Adam Thielen out on injured reserve and Deontay Johnson suddenly popping up with a groin injury, the only guy I see having real upside here is Xavier Legette. I'm going to take my dart throw on Xavier Legette, and then I think I'm going to go with Pop Douglas and hope for kind of a PPR floor. I'm going to try to mitigate my disaster potentially by having Pop Douglas. If I want to just go balls to the wall and really go high upside, like this is all risk, it's all risk. There's no safety net. Like if this is the acrobatic, you are swinging and you're doing the flip and you're either grabbing the thing and you're making it look like $1 million or you're landing on the floor and your team is dead. I think if you wanted to do that, it's Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette. I think I would split the difference personally, and I think I would go Xavier Legette and Pop Douglas, depending on what the rest of my lineup looks like too. If the rest of my lineup is really rough and like just a bunch of really floor plays, that's where I'm like, fuck it. Like I'm clearly not winning unless I get 2 just monster unexpected weeks. That's where I would go Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette. But I think because of the injury and the backup role still, I think I'm going Legette and Pop Douglas. I really wanted Bucky Irving to be the answer here, but I don't. I think we're still a couple weeks away. Jerry asked, PPR, Alan Lazard or Colby Parkinson? I'm going Alan Lazard here. I love Colby Parkinson. I really wanted him to be a thing. I'm not seeing enough even on the target share. That's the real problem. If he was seeing 7 to 8 targets a game and just, wasn't catching all of them, that would be one thing. The target share is not there right now. He doesn't feel like a first or second look even in this offense, in spite of Matt Stafford traditionally going to tight ends. He almost made a nice one-handed catch, and even that would not have changed his fantasy outcome that much. I think he would have ended up with like 3 for 35 or some shit. Like these tight end streets are rough. And if I'm putting a guy in a flex, in a PPR, it's going to be Alan Lazard. And I'm going to just hope that because Garrett Wilson is busy with Pat Surtain, that Lazard sees a little bit more this week. Jonas asked Rodgers or Richardson. Fuck. Oh, man, that's oof. Shit. Again, this is very team dependent. If the rest of your team looks like a floor play, I would go with Anthony Richardson. You're either going to get 20 plus or you're going to get -5, it feels like. But with Rodgers, it feels like you're getting 15 and that's it. Like that. I don't see any world where Rodgers is going to go dog walk the Broncos for like 404. at this stage of his career. With Pat Surtain on Garrett Wilson, I just don't see it happening. I think you're praying for 202, honestly. I think that's possible. I think it's even potentially maybe more likely than Anthony Richardson just crushing the Steelers. Yeah, again, floor play Rodgers, pure upside, hope on the unicorn, Anthony Richardson. I would say 7 times out of 10, I'm playing Rodgers just because the way that my lineup, like again, I would play Rodgers, and because I played Rodgers, that's what would make me then end up being like, okay, well, fuck it, I'm going Keon Coleman and Xavier Legette and hoping for the best, like boom games. And if I don't get them, I won't win this week, and that's just my luck. We got Jay in the chat. Jawan Jennings, DeAndre Hopkins, or Xavier Worthy. Oh, so obviously Jawan Jennings coming off the best fantasy game of the entire year. George Kittle is back. Deebo Samuel, I don't think is back this week. Oh, this is a tough one. I actually really like DeAndre Hopkins. I think he's the one that's underrated. I think the Titans might have like a sneaky good game in them this week against the Dolphins. Oh, and he's coming off 6 for 73 and a tutty. Is DeAndre Hopkins. That's the one that gives me the cause for pause. I love Xavier Worthy, but they're just not really like using him right now. It seems like they're still stuck in last year's offense of like a lot of the short stuff. He's only seen 4 targets in any of the 3 games. It's 4, 4, and 3. And that first game, again, it was only because he had the 2 touchdowns. It seems like they're being a little too gadgety with him, it feels like he had 3 rushes last game. I don't want to see that kind of shit. Like give me 7 targets as opposed to 4 targets and 3 rush attempts. Like I think, you know what, again, I'm staying in the flames. I'm chasing the points here. I'm going with Jawan Jennings. DeAndre Hopkins, I think, could definitely have a good game. I think Jawan Jennings could have equally as good of a game. I'm kind of basing this too. I know he's facing the Patriots. I'm basing it off of what the Seahawks did to the Patriots when we saw DK Metcalf and JSN both have huge days against them. So I think Brandon Ayuk is capable of having a good game at the same time as Jawan Jennings. And, you know, Kittle in the first game back of injury will surely be involved. I don't think it's enough to wipe out Jawan Jennings. I think Deebo would have to come back also to relegate Jawan Jennings back to kind of a wide receiver 3 role. I think the way this is going to end up being is you're going to have Ayuk as your wide receiver 1 and then Jennings as your wide receiver 2. And we've seen the connection with Purdy and Jennings already. I think you're just opening things up, honestly, by putting Kittle in the middle of the field. I'm going with Jennings here. Crazy. I can't believe I'm saying this shit. And I hope it doesn't disappear and drought on you. But yeah, I think I'm chasing Jawan Jennings here because DeAndre Hopkins had 2 bad games and then the one good game. And yes, Will Levis can just play chuck it ball, but he's also been fucking terrible. And Miami's defense is slightly above average, even though they've been struggling. Like if Huntley plays well and the game ends up being a little bit more low scoring, kind of more rush attempts too, and doesn't take as long. Yeah, it's a struggle for me, but I think, again, I'm still going with Jawan Jennings. Jerry Bagshaw asking Chuba Hubbard or T. Higgins in PPR. This for me is Chuba Hubbard easily. Again, the fact that the wide receivers are banged up, Adam Thielen on IR, Deontay Johnson suddenly popping up with a groin issue, Andy Dalton suddenly making this offense look competent. The offensive line, especially the interior offensive line that was improved upon, that we talked about during the offseason, we have finally seen that now that, again, Daddy Dalton has been able to be a little bit more competent of a quarterback. So I think Chuba Hubbard is going to have pretty much the exact same game he had last week. I don't see any reason that he's not going to get basically the same amount of work, the same amount of volume. The Bengals are not that great of a run defense specifically. They're okay against the pass when they can get chasing you and get Trey Hendrickson on you. They're not that great against the run. In fact, that's how we've seen them struggle a lot through these first 3 weeks on defense. I'm definitely rolling with Chuba Hubbard here to the point that I can tell you I have multiple DFS lineups this week, or like underdog lineups or drafters lineups that I drafted, and I've got Chuba Hubbard in my flex in more than one. And that's because I'm expecting him to have yet another explosive game. And so even if T. Higgins ends up having like a good game, I think it's more likely from Chuba. I think it's safer. I think it's a safer floor. Yeah, T. Higgins maybe has a crazy blow-up game. Maybe he has the same game he had last week where it's like 3 for 40. So that's kind of where I'm at with Chuba Hubbard and T. Higgins. But I'm very confident in Chuba Hubbard this week. All right, we'll grab another couple questions out of Fantasy Advice Network, and then I'll take a couple more from the chat, and we'll get on out of here. Jerome Ford or Brian Thomas Jr. in the flex. Oh, yeah, I think I'm still going Jerome Ford there for safety. I love Brian Thomas Jr. The breakout is coming for Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe this is the week. It's hard to say. It's going to, when it happens, you just have to have him in the lineup and not on the bench. So it sucks, but I do think Jerome Ford has the more consistent workload right now and the safer floor. So again, it's like, what does your team really need this week? Are you looking for floor? Are you looking for ceiling? Maybe if you want to like be the one that's like, you know what, I really feel that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to have the big breakout week this week against the Texans in a division game, and I just really feel that in my heart, play him over Jerome Ford. I'm saying Jerome Ford to me is like the safer one to get you 10 to 12. Like, I see him as having the safer floor. If you're like, oh, my team is stacked, I'm first in the league, I'm dropping points on everybody, I just need a guy in my flex because, you know, this week I'm missing AJB or someone. Like, that's where, okay, fine, I would probably go with Ford in that situation. But yeah. Is it time to give up on Anthony Richardson and Derek Carr? No. It's not time to give up on either of them. With the state of quarterbacks already, I mean, we've already seen multiple quarterback injuries. Tua on IR, Justin Herbert dealing with his own injuries. We lost the rookie at the beginning of the season for the Vikings, and now we've got Sam Darnold. Again, we'll see more quarterback injuries, unfortunately, evolve during the rest of the season. I don't wish it on any teams, but no, and Anthony Richardson especially, it's like if you weren't expecting this, then I don't know I don't understand the thought process of drafting a unicorn like Anthony Richardson and being like, well, of course he's only going to have consistent games. It's like he's not even a consistent passer of the football. The whole point is that like he is very boomer busty. It's like, yeah, he might go out and drop 40, 50 fantasy points depending on the league format. He might go out and drop 4 or 5 fantasy points. Like, you kind of have to live with those down games to take advantage of the huge boom games when they happen, because they're week winners when they happen. And with Derek Carr, it's like, bro, if you don't know who Derek Carr is by now, Derek Carr has just been this for years and years and years, and he had a hot start to the beginning of the season, but nothing that happened at the beginning of the year made me change my mind about Derek Carr as he's a good streaming quarterback. He is a solid quarterback 2 or 3 in a super flex. He's not the guy you want as you're locked in every week, 100%. I'm starting him no matter what. I don't think that guy even exists this year, quite frankly. Like, the way I've seen Mahomes, I mean, aside from maybe the top end rushing quarterbacks, but even Jalen Hurts just had a bad game. Lamar Jackson hasn't been like crushing the world, and he has off games sometimes. Kyler Murray, I think, has maybe been the most consistent through 3 weeks, but he's very capable of having a bad game. I don't think there is any more right now this year with the way the offenses are playing and the way the defenses are playing. There is no quarterback that's just set it and forget it this year, except maybe Josh Allen. Maybe that's the one I'm forgetting, is the Stallion, Josh Allen. And that's what I really got to eat a big L on, because I really thought that with everything leaving that offense and what they added to it, I didn't think it was going to be enough. I didn't think it would be this good this early in terms of how Josh Allen looks. I thought he would continue to struggle a lot more like what we saw last year with the 18 interceptions. Like, yeah, he's a unicorn. He's always going to be able to rush the ball. But the way they've been passing has been exceptionally better than I thought. And I think it is based on how successful the run game has been, because it's like you got to stop James Cook and Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. And while you're doing that, oh, fuck, we forgot about Khalil Shakir. Oh, shit, we forgot about, Keon Coleman or whoever it happens to be. And as we see Coleman and Kincaid maybe eventually start to evolve, maybe we see an even higher form of this offense. But right now, I think it's a lot better than I was anticipating. And so I have to eat that L because I was fading Josh Allen a little bit. Not that I was like, you can't draft him, but I was like, me personally, I don't feel good taking him at the high ADP when I see other guys I can get late that I think this year will be closer to his production than people expect. And really, he has been able to begin to separate himself already early in the season. If that continues through the rest of the season, then I'll be taking an official huge L on that. All right. I saw a couple questions come into the chat. Let's hit those and then let's get on out of here. Scott Carroll, top of the morning to you. Jerome Ford or Michael Wilson, half PPR. We're seeing a lot of Jerome Ford questions. I really like Michael Wilson today. I'm not going to lie. Against Washington with McBride out, I think we're going to see a lot of Michael Wilson and the Dortch, Greg Dortch here, especially because MHJ I think will play, but as far as I know, he was on injury report, at least is questionable. So he's dealing with something. So I don't know, again, that it's going to negate essentially necessarily what he's going to do, but he hasn't been like a target hog really through. He's not Malik Neighbors soaking up 15 targets through those first couple of weeks. So I think there's going to be room for Michael Wilson to have a nice game here, and that makes me scared to sit him. I think. But Jerome Ford is just so it's an easier path for Jerome Ford to have a viable game. And because it's half PPR, no, you know what? I'm sticking with my gut. My gut says Michael Wilson is gonna have a good game here. I'm projecting like 6 for 75 and a tutty. I think he's gonna be kind of like the guy that Kyler looks to in a sense to replace Trey McBride because he's the big body wide receiver. And, the Dortch is going to be kind of working in and out of the slot. You have MHJ. I think it's a tough call, but there's something that tells me deep in my gut that it's Michael Wilson. I might end up being wrong. I hope Jerome Ford doesn't have like a crazy fucking blow-up game, but I hope so too because I said Jerome Ford for so many other people, and I have him. So I want him to have a great game. I just also don't want you to not benefit from it. Fuck's sakes. Yeah, I'm torn. I still think final call. I'm going Jerome Ford. I can't get the fact of starting a backup wide receiver. And as much as I like Michael Wilson, I think he has progressed a lot over the last year. I think he's going to have a good game. I just still think that Jerome Ford has the easier path to 15 to 20 fantasy points, and so I'm going to stick with him, actually. All right, Najee Harris, Drake London, or Jaden Reed. Drake London's got a really tough matchup against New Orleans, but I think that's the one I'm going with. Again, Najee makes me really nervous this week. I know he's going to play, but his arm was in a sling. I'm assuming it was the left arm too, because if it was his right, if you told me his right arm was in a sling and he's going to play this game, there's no fucking way that I would want to actively chase playing Najee in this game, even though I think he's going to get 17 to 20 touches. I just don't think they're going to be very efficient. I think the Colts defense is a little bit underrated too. They still have DeForest Buckner and a pretty decent defensive line. Their linebackers are okay. I feel like It's such a struggle. No, I'm going with Drake London. I'm just taking. But Drayden Reed, Jordan Love's back. No. We're gonna hope that Kirk Cousins continues to ascend. We're gonna take the wide receiver one on the team. We're gonna go with Drake London, and we're gonna hope. That's how I feel, anyways. And I'm not a Drake London guy, just to tell you. I really faded him a lot in my drafts, and so for me to not be a Drake London guy and still feel like he's the right play here, I think it's not by a lot. I do think Jayden Reed is very capable, but I think London is ascending. You'd hope he sees continued growth with Kirk Cousins. Yeah, it's a tough call, but I think just by a nut hair, I'm going with Drake London here. All right. That's enough for me today. I appreciate every single one of you guys coming out and jumping into the comments. Thank you, Jerry, for the comment. Thanks all for all your help. Great show. Again, so thank you to Jerry, Scott, Jay, Albert, Jonas, Zach, Z Smitty, and All Rise, Chase28. Thank you, everyone who dropped comments today. Thank you to fantasysportsadvice.network, where I pulled all the rest of the questions from. Again, make sure you go check them out. I'll be back tomorrow, Monday, with the Hearts and Farts reaction show. That'll be going live. Assuming I don't have anything else going on, I think I might try to go a little bit earlier and go live at 6, but it might have to still be at 7 p.m. Leading into Monday Night Football, but we'll figure that out tomorrow. All I know is I hope you guys have a really good day of fantasy football. Best of luck in all of your matchups, and I'll catch all of you guys on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes